Dobre utra. Good morning to those of you joining us in New England. Dobre vicha. Good evening to those of you joining us from Russia. Welcome and thank you. We are very grateful to you for joining us here this morning and for being part of our community. My name is Elric Walker. I'm a board member of the Jung Association of Western Massachusetts. I am so glad to be here with you for this very special event. Before we begin, I would like to tell you a little about the Jung Association of Western Massachusetts. We are a mostly volunteer organization founded in 1996, concerned with promoting and exploring in community with others the ideas of the great depth psychologist Carl Gustav Jung. I'd like to take a quick moment to introduce you to our board members and to thank them for their work on behalf of the association. Christine Olson is our president and fearless leader. Penelope Tarasuk and Erica Lorenz are board members and advisors, and two of the longest serving members of the board. Judy Hall is our bookkeeper. Judith Breyer is helping with fundraising and hybrid tech. We welcome Dan Hathaway and Peter O'Brien as our newest board members. I serve as public relations liaison for the association. Many kind thanks to Andrew, who is here this morning providing Zoom and technical assistance. Thank you, Andrew. Just a quick note about our next upcoming lecture. We will return to our regular first Friday of the month in February. So on Friday, February the 2nd at 7 o'clock, the lecture will be Emily Dickinson and C.G. Jung, Soulmates. And our lecturer is Kay Lindauer. This looks very interesting. Imagine that, Emily Dickinson and C.G. Jung, Soulmates. Please join us for that. For more information about upcoming lectures, about the association and its members, and for access to recordings of past presentations, please visit our website at westmassjung.org. Now, this morning we have two very special guests, Natalia Pavlikova and Ed Tick presenting Exploring the Russian Psyche, Light and Shadow. Natalia is joining us from Moscow, Russia, and Dr. Ed Tick is here with us locally. He will tell you a little bit more about Natalia in just a moment. I would first like to introduce you to our very own Ed Tick. He is a former member of the board and a current advisor to the board and a dear and much beloved friend of the association. For those of you who may not know him, Dr. Edward Tick, PhD, is an archetypal psychotherapist. He is an author, an educator, and an international journey guide. He is an expert on ancient Greece and the origins of medicine and psychotherapy in the Asclepian tradition. His book, The Practice of Dream Healing, is a modern contemporary classic. He is Director Emeritus of Soldier's Heart. He also has pioneered archetypal and culturally based healing with veterans and trauma survivors for over 40 years. In addition to his private practice, Dr. Tick works in Greece, in Vietnam, and internationally on holistic and spiritually based healing and the restoration of ancient practices. He has led numerous healing pilgrimages to Greece and to Vietnam. He is the author of 8 books, including the award-winning War and the Soul, and his most recent book, Soul Medicine. He uses the Greek tradition extensively in healing, writing, and teaching. And I would add, and I dare say, he is a keeper of the ancient lineage of Delphi. And he is an adept practitioner and a spiritual disciple of the healing path of Apollo's wise and illustrious son, Asclepius. Please welcome Dr. Ed Tick.
Wow. Thank you very much, Elric, for your warm and your beautiful opening. I feel very humbled and grateful for the beautiful words that you shared about me, as well as your service to our association and community. Thank you very much. So, Privet all, welcome. Welcome to our friends from all over the region, the country, and the world. We're really pleased and honored, as Elric said, that you joined us for this special event today, and especially grateful to you, Natasha, for coming to our world as you bring me to your world. So to everybody else, would you please type in where you are from, either next to your name or in the chat, so that we can all appreciate the scope of our gathering. We're really excited that people have come from far and wide, and that not only Natalia, but also some of our Russian friends and colleagues are with us today. So bless you and thank you for making this long journey around the world. So for today, the wisdom teachings of the world, all of the wisdom traditions of the world, all teach us that we can only end the endless cycles of human violence when we substitute respectful discourse and persuasion, words, for the force and the terror that have been the mainstay in human history. So Natalia and I and our Jung Association all hope that our humble gathering today, through our shared discourse, can contribute in a small way to greater international friendship, understanding, cooperation, and compassion. So before I introduce my dear friend and colleague, Natalia, first I'm going to light, I have an altar right in front of my desk here, and I'm going to light a candle, place it on the altar to burn for us and to help bring light and spirit to our gathering. And before I light it, I want to show you my small candle holder for my altar is in the shape of a butterfly. Butterfly in ancient Greek is Psyche, Psyche. The ancient Greeks conceived of our souls as the shape of like spirit butterflies inside us that are released upon death. So I am lighting this butterfly candle for Psyche. And may Psyche be with all of us today, guide us and heal us and restore us and help us restore our suffering world. Secondly, again, before we turn to Natalia, I'd like to share a very brief meditation. So I invite you all to please close your eyes and breathe deeply and meditate for a moment. Let your thoughts, your memories, your impressions just flow through you regarding Russia. So in your inner space, in your inner sacred soul space, just review for a moment. What do you think and believe about Russia? What do you know of its culture, its history, literature, art, religion? Might you have any Russian roots? Have you or do you have any Russian friends or colleagues? What are your own positive impressions of everything Russian? And what are your questions, concerns, confusions? What don't you know and might you want to know about Russia and the Russian people and culture? And what about the shadow? really look inside your mind and heart and ask yourself, do you have any fears, prejudices, anxieties about Russia and the Russians? Do you personally carry any negativity toward the land and people? If you find any discomfort or there hidden in the darkness inside you, let it blow away. Just let it go. Today, here, now, and in service to our friendship with Natalia. And let's open our minds and our hearts so that we all may become one. So take another deep breath, or two or three, and come back into the room and into our shared space. And open your eyes, and let's all see each other anew. And so now, with this brief opening, let's turn to our good friend and colleague, Natalia. I'm honored to introduce Natalia, and she deserves lots and lots of credit, honor, respect for everything she's doing in Russia and internationally. Natalia Pavlikova is a Jungian analyst in Moscow. She's a clinical psychologist. She graduated from the psychology department at Moscow State University. After that, she worked at the Scientific Center for Mental Health and the Clinic for Medical Nutrition as a medical psychologist. She has been putting body, mind, and spirit together her whole career. She also trained in psychotrauma and Ericksonian hypnosis, and in 2010 was certified as a Jungian analyst. Natalia's been in private practice for more than 20 years, and with the Russian Society of Analytic Psychology, Natalia was vice president from 2012 to 15, president until 2023, and she now serves on their training committee and often lectures for them and internationally for Jungian associations everywhere. Throughout her work, Natalia has passionately developed connections between international colleagues and professional societies in many different countries. She is distressed, of course, by the suffering in her country today. And so 2 years ago now, she assembled a group of psychologists to work with combatants, their families, and civilians who have been traumatized by war. As part of her devoted effort to help her country and people, Natalia has reached out to trauma healers all over the world. She contacted me late in 2022, and we've been friends and colleagues ever since. And I want to share from my heart, and for you, Natalia, our friendship has been a great gift to me. My grandmother was a Russian Jew, and not only do I have a candle burning for us, but Grandma's here. Grandma's here. I really, truly feel her spirit more peaceful and at rest, thanks to our friendship and collaborations. With Natalia and her sensitive and generous spirit, her huge heart, deep knowledge and insights, and great courage, I have learned very much about Russian culture, history, geography, religion, and people. This has changed my understanding, not only of Russia, but of world history and of how and why it has shaped itself in the ways that we encounter and all struggle with together today. So in our virtual universe, Natalia has brought me to Russia, and I am honored to bring you, Natalia, here to us. So spasiba, Natasha. And to all of us, I am pleased and honored to give you my dear friend and colleague, Natalia Pavlikova.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. And it is a huge honor for me to be a friend of yours and to hear such moving words addressing to me. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
your invitation. Should we start?
Well, yeah, is there any for everybody, Natalia and I have been talking about this program for months, and together we've meditated carefully on the main themes it feels most important to bring to you to create the most comprehensive understanding of Russia that we can possibly achieve together today. So we have a series of 6 questions I'll ask and turn over to Natalia. But mostly, of course, we want to hear from you, dear friend. So
Sure.
is there anything you want to say by way of introduction, or should we just dive into our concerns for everybody?
Very concerned about timing, and I would like probably to jump into the issue that we all are trying to investigate, and I think that we've been waiting for several months already to make this presentation, and I think that the situation in the world at the moment is getting even worse since we started thinking about this meeting and this gathering. So I think that we are talking today about the Russian psyche and about the Russian light and shadow sides. But behind this, there will be an issue about the objective psyche of the whole world, because the whole world at the moment is in a very tense situation, and our whole psyche needs some light and attention. So we can start with the Russian one.
Yes, okay. Okay, so our first concern, shared concern, is about geography and the relationship between territory and psyche. So
I will share the screen with you. Is it seen? Can you see it? Okay.
yeah, we're good. Yes, okay, good. So we all know this, but do we know how massive Russia is? Russia is the world's largest country by far. Canada comes second, China comes third, and Russia is almost twice the size of Canada. It occupies much of Northern Europe and Asia and stretches across both continents. So, Natalia, how, by its sheer size, its many time zones and ethnicities within its border, how has this shaped Russian history and psyche and government? And even, do you have any comments in a larger archetypal sense about what we can learn, understand about the connection between territory and psyche?
Yes, and I would like to share some maps with you, so it would be more visible and sensible. All the ideas and all my thoughts on cultural complex that we have. The first map, or I think that's we missed one that is the picture of Hobbes' Leviathan, and the picture says that the leader of the country consists of different people, and our cultural psyche also consists of the psyche of the members of the society. And since our country is big, it is consists of a lot of different psyche of people who live in a very different conditions, and in a very different time zones and very different climate zones. And if we'll move here, this is the solar resource map, and we can see that some regions receive a lot of sunlight, and some regions receive less sunlight. And on this picture, we can see the different lightning that our different countries receive. And we can see that the biggest part of Russia lives in twilight, and we all are used to to adapt to the conditions where we have no light and we have no heat. And it is not all the time, but it is during summer we have long days, and our consciousness is lightened up with the external sun, and we have more time to work, to study, to spend energy during the day. But during winter, the days are so short that it's not really possible to work or to read, especially in the 19th when there was no electricity. So people were used to collect or to reserve their energy during summer so they can spend their winter time in a lazy way, or in a way where they had to serve the energy. And the curve of our activity is different from the regions where the sun and heat is more available on a regular basis. So I feel that this had an impact on the psyche and on the temperaments, on the nature of Russians in a general way here. That's some, as a nation, we have periods where we can do a lot of work. We have periods when we can be very achieving something, but then there will be a period of time when we allowing ourselves to be lazy. So we can't work, and this is one of the national characteristic, that we can't work continuously on a high level, or we can't be very predictive in our level of work. So 3 months we are working and we are very tough, and then we need time to be lazy or to be lower in our achievements. And I think that this has a connection with the geographical and the solar with irradiation, or with solar irradiation. Do I sound clear? Okay.
Yeah, I hear you talking about the amount of the natural light from the outer world really impacting the psyche and our consciousness, and how much light and energy and wakefulness we have in our inner world, and that the inner world gets reshaped by the external climate.
Yes, and we are very sensitive to different twilight experiences, because we live or we have to live for many months in a very twilight environment where something is not clear, and we need to develop a different sense of recognizing things. And to heat up ourselves and to heat up our interest to things that are surrounding us. And the mood also is very connected to the light. If we are in the dark, we are less high, and we are less happy, because there's nothing to be happy about for in the darkness.
When I'm reading Russian literature or seeing Russian drama, I always feel like I'm in that twilight zone. Oh, we had an American TV series called The Twilight Zone. I didn't mean to refer to that, but I mean in between darkness and light, and the dark is falling, and the human shadow is very deeply in the inner world, very deeply deeply revealed and being explored by your writers and artists. So I can hardly even remember scenes in Russian literature, in my mind, that were brightly lit. Like everything seems to happen in the twilight and the dark and the shadows to reveal the inner world of humanity.
Yes, I think that's correct, because if the external life has this twilight side, then our internal life as well is very is covered or is located or where we have an interest in twilight's inner zones as well. And I think that Russians, they treat their country and the land as the mother, and we have a lot of sayings about the motherland, and land for Russians has maternal features, and we attribute to the land as to the mother complex or to the mother archetype. And we are used to see mother and like mother archetype in a very polarized way. In summer, it is very warm and welcoming, but in the winter, it is very cold, and we need to think in advance how to face the cold mother, how to deal with her, because we can't avoid it. We can't move to the south because the borders are either we have the desert on the south, or there are some other people or nations. So we are used to create and to adopt to all the cold attributes of the motherland, of this cold weather. And if we, that's not a comparison of our climates, that's those who live on the northern states of the United States, you can have an impression how the climate is in Russia. But the majority of Russia or Russian climate is similar to Canadian climate, and we don't have this warm and sunny Florida land. There are none in Russia, so we are more used to these severe weather conditions, and we learned how to survive during these severe days. At the moment, we have minus 30 degrees Celsius. It's around 5-10 degrees in Fahrenheit, if I'm not mistaken. This climate gave us or forced us to live in groups. You can't survive in these severe conditions by yourself. You need to be within the group to get the woods prepared for winter, to collect the fruits and vegetables during summer, and you need to be very attentive towards to your neighbors, how they would see what you collected, and but I think that we will talk about the neighbors a bit later.
Okay.
And because the land is so huge, as you saw it on the map, we have very big areas, and the area is big, but all the area that belongs to Russia is not that comforting in the weather that the lands in India, for example, or in the States. But I will go back to it a little bit later. And there was a question about the history of the state. Maybe I will briefly describe what was the historical roots of Russia and probably the historical roots of the conflict that we're facing at the moment. Yes, no, Ed?
Yeah, sure. With your emphasis on, you gave a good a good portrait of the climate and the territory and how that has shaped the Russian psyche over hundreds of years. So that's good, and we've started there. You also stress the necessity to live, the challenges of livability, and how people have to be vigilant and attentive to themselves, to the weather, to each other, and act collectively or else. And on this side of the ocean, there's so much of an emphasis on individuality, and we struggle to act collectively. But in Russia, because of the conditions you have to live with, there's an absolute necessity for collectivity. So we need to understand that and need to understand how to navigate the differences between individuality and collectivity and bring it all together. So we've arrived there, and that's good. And now to turn to the historical matters. So yes, please share with us. We do know that Russia has had a very long and complex history over many centuries. You have the date of 862. So we're talking about 12 or 1300 year of history. Russia has been an empire in different eras, under different rulers, and under different forms of governance. So please do share with us, how has Russia evolved over the centuries? So how do the different empires compare with each other? How did they impact each other? What can you say about the transgenerational impact of the Russian evolution on the Russian psyche and on Russian history? And we all have these questions. We've lived through the era of the Soviet Union and its collapse or its end. We probably use different words for that too, which we should learn. But how did the Soviet era and its aftermath shape the Russian psyche? And what's the ongoing impact on the psyche today? Many big questions about history's flow and its impact, long-term impact.
These are very big questions, and I would like to mention that I'm not historian professionally. I am a psychologist, as it was noted by Ed, and I'm interested in Russian cultural complex since 2007 or even earlier than that, because I used to live in the United States for 3 years as an exchange student, and I felt the difference, the cultural difference between life in the States and between the life in Russia. And it was in the 1996 till 2001. So I tried to figure out what is inside or behind our conscious attitudes towards each other that could make this unverbalized feeling of difference between the nations. Because when you live not like a tourist in a different country, you still can feel that you fit or you don't fit with some very peculiar things that you never paid attention to in your own country. For example, I was amazed that Americans, they don't take off their shoes when they come to the houses, and it's totally unthinkable in Russia. That's a very small thing, but it shows you the difference between the cultures. And I thought my first paper was about the shape of the shadow, the cultural shadow. And my first thought was that Russian shadow is more maternal, or it belongs to the negative mother archetype, comparing to more structured and more hierarchized shadow of the Western culture. When if we're comparing the shadow of the West and the East, Western devil, or the institute of all these diabolic archetypes, it has of course, it has the influence, cultural influence by Dante, but you have 9 circles of hell, which is unthinkable in Russia. You have hell, no circles, no levels. You will be punished by authority in Russian hell, but or for making sins in Russia. So that was my first attempt to look inside the cultural complex. And then while working with ads, my thoughts are constantly changing when I'm reading more information. So what I'm saying is not the mm, um, the last thing that can be said about Russian complex. It's just the invitation for all of us to think in this direction and to look for the answers. When I start checking the facts, the historical facts about Russia, I began with the beginning, with the ancient Rus that started in the 9th century, and I will just show you several maps without stopping on each of them. So just to give the impression of how it developed. So while widening in the shape of the country, the Kievan Rus or the ancient Rus, we can see that where we would start, where we'll continue. Yeah, we will see that during the first centuries of existence, Rus was trying to widen its area. There were a lot of movements towards east, and the western part was always under the wars with either Poland or Lithuania or Hungary. And this part, this border of Russia would be always under attack, or would be always changing. So this piece of land is always moving to Poland, to Russia, to Lithuania, to Russia, to Hungary, to Russia. We will see it on this colored map. In the 12th century, where were all the Christian wanderers to Israel from I forgot the word, so I won't go there. Russia was fragmented. All the governors, they were from one or similar families. They were brothers, nephews, uncles, sons, and they shared different parts of land between the family. Their inability to communicate with each other was one of the reasons when Mongolian era came. I will here it is. We can see this golden horde of Mongols came to Russia, and they invaded not just Russian territories, but parts of Europe as well. And the Golden Horde was invading, or was the Russia was under the Golden Horde for 250 years. So it's almost 2.5 centuries. And we can see how Horde was moving. So it's took all the territory of China, of Mongolia, of Asian countries, and up to Hungary. So the Horde was really big, and it stayed on the Russian territories for 247 years. We will go back to this image a little bit later. So when Russians decided to to fight back, or I will start again with the rules of Mongolians. They were not to kill the people and invade the lands just for themselves, but their policy was a bit different. They wanted the nations to bring them warriors to their army, to give the money, and to feed their people. But they were nomads, and they were moving through the countries. So they didn't want the countries that they invaded to change their language. They didn't want them to change their religion. They didn't ruin their cities. That was not their point. They just wanted them to be together and to help them to invade other countries. So Russians, they were paying the rent, or paying the dues to Mongols to lead the life they used to. Some of their principles, Russian principles, they were taking to the Mongolians' families. They used to remarry each other, Russians and Mongolians. But in the 15th century, since the 14th century, Russian principles started to think of getting their autonomy back. And in the end of the 14th century, they started to fight back. And the power at the moment was already not in Kiev, but in Moscow. And Principality of Moscow took an important role of saving or taking Russia back. And this is a very tricky period of time. And this is the point where, at the moment, historical facts from Russian side and Ukrainian side are interpreting differently. We can see the Ukrainian, or if we go back, we can see this. That's also already Moscow. Here it is the basic ancient truth that was created around Kiev. And then after Mongolian horde went back, the center moved to Moscow. There are different interpretations why it moved to Moscow, and if Moscow Principality has the right to be called or to be called Russian, but still they were all from the same family. And then after the Moscow fought back to the Golden Horde, it began to widen their borders, and they began to widen their borders on the east part. So let me see what is where we are at the moment. So Russia reunited, but some of the land and the land that was on the western part, it became the Poland-Lithuanian property. So then we can see a lot of wars on this border. Those who were on east, the nations and the peoples on the east, they just saw the power of Golden Horde, and they asked the Russian government to protect them from the Horde. So the mix or the widening of the eastern borders were a bit different. The history behind it was different. The Western people, the Eastern people, they were asking for protection, and some regions, they were fought with army of Ivan IV, Ivan the Terrible, who won Kazan, and all the Tatarstan was taken by the military force. That's it. And Ivan IV, he established the Tsardom of Russia. So it was not the principality the principality of Moscow, but it was the Tsardom of Russia since the end of the 15th century. And this is the time when America was discovered. That time started the movement from the Western Europe towards West for the new territories that were thought that they never had the contact with European countries. So there was something new that was discovered by the European countries, while the movement of Russians towards East, they didn't discover someone new, and they were not new for those who lived on their territories behind the Ural Mountains and going back to Siberia. There were some trades and some contacts between these people before with Russians. So we will pass some schemes behind. So in the 17th century, Russia was widened by territory of Siberia. And in the 18th century, Russia called itself the empire. So it was not already the Tsardom, but it was an empire named by Peter the First. Yeah, and he was proclaimed the emperor. And he was one of the first emperors who traveled to Europe, and he noticed the difference between the educational system and between the level of living in Russia and in Europe. And he tried to bring back what he saw, the advantages that he saw in Europe to Russia. And it was the time when the split began or widened or deepened, the split between those who traveled to the West and those who lived on the land in Russia. Because this is one of the biggest split in the society in Russia between the high class, the educated class of people, and people who live more on land and on the being the peasants, for example. And one of the other big features that is different in Russia than in Europe. The distances, as we can imagine, and the difference between level of life in the cities and in the villages. We have a lot of villages and just few cities, and there is a very few roads that connect the cities between each other and the villages between each other. And during the wintertime, some villages were isolated because there were no roads. And in the 19th century and in the 20th as well, there was a saying that the biggest problem of Russia are the fools and the roads, because there are no roads at all. And even now, when you travel, you can see that there are federal highways that's built by the government, and if you move 100 meters away, you see no roads at all. And there are we're calling that there are no roads, there are directions. You can see where you can drive to reach any other local center. So there was a split between those who live in the cities, who communicate with each other, who saw some foreigners, and there was a split with those who lived in the villages, because they saw just those who live with them, and they were very not they knew less about the life in the foreign countries, and they care less about how all life in the different countries were built, because they needed to survive on the ground. They needed to survive in these severe climate conditions. And there was another thing about the technological and educational side in Russia that is described by Alexander Etkind in his book about Russian history, that Europe used Russia as a source of fur, for wood. And there was a deal that Russians would bring these resources to Europe, but they would not learn how to manage it, how to make the wood into the into something, how to make the coats from the fur that they brought into Europe. So all the fashions and all the art was developed in Europe, but this development was prohibited in Russia. But that's one of the ways of thinking about it. So we stopped in the 18th century. Then Alaska was discovered, and it was part of Russia. So Russia moved towards east and even further to the American continent, having a lot of fights for the areas that are in between Russia and Europe. All these areas where we can see part of Ukraine, Moldova, and Romania and Bulgaria. We can see all these wars for Caucasus and Caucasian countries that were also that became part of Russia, because they also asked for protection from the Osmanian Empire, Um, Now it is contemporary Turkey and Iran and Iraq. They used to be the United Empire. So that's approximately the time of French Revolution, the first one. Then there was a patriotic war against Napoleon, and Russian peasants that were in serfdom at that time. They played a huge part in protecting and fighting back with the French army. And uh, um, higher society, they were expecting the Tsar or the Emperor to give them freedom um, for the gratitude for saving the country. But somehow Alexander the First he didn't do it, and this freedom was postponed 50 years after, and it is considered one of the reasons of the Great October Revolution that people were very upset, both the high society and the peasants themselves. So we will move forward, and we will see that in the 1867, the area of Russia was the biggest in the whole history, because some of the Asian countries they joined Russia, and Alaska was still the part of Russian Empire. But in the 1867, Alaska was sold to the United States. So that was one of the first big pieces of land that was lost by or that was sold by Russians at that moment. So, and where, yeah. And as I said before, that the 50 years after the victory of Russians in the war with Napoleon, the peasants were given freedom and they were free from serfdom. But it's also a very tricky question, because the serfdom was only the part that is covered by with red color. So only the parts of the land that initially belonged to Russian principles, only there we had serfdom. When the land was widened by taking the new territories, they were free from serfdom. And some peasants that were that wanted freedom, they just could run away here to these regions, and no one would send them back. So this is the question that also needs to be thought deeply, how it what it tells us about the psyche of Russian people that time. Because those who were serving, or the slaves, they were the same color, the same religion, the same origin as those who they were serving. So their owners could go to the same church with them. They were praying the same prayers and to the same God. And it was built into the psyche that you can live in the same building with those who are serving you. And they could know your grandparents, and they could belong to your family for many, many centuries. They speak the same language as you. But with language, there was another part of the cultural complex, because after Peter the Great, when the higher society started to travel to Europe, they started to use the language of Europeans. And for several centuries, the higher society spoke either French or German, whatever nation was ruling their Europe, and they almost didn't speak Russian. And Pushkin, the great Russian poet that lived in the 19th century, he revived Russian language, and he brought it back to high society. And the Russian culture that belonged to peasants um, who didn't have any education, they didn't save any, they didn't write. So some of their stories we don't know, and we know them only through fairy tales. Even the myths, in Slavic myths, they don't exist. We don't have them because there were a lot of fires, there were a lot of wars, and Russians used the not the skin, but the external part of the trees to write on them. And because it's wood, it doesn't last too long. So we lost many historical documents because they were written on this material. Ed, do we have any? Can I go further, or?
Natalia, thank you very much. Can you please switch from the historical to the psychological
Yeah.
now? People really want to understand with this long, complex history and many territory expanding and contracting and wars on the borders and such, people really want to understand how this has impacted the Russia and the development and the shape of the Russian psyche. So we're in history and psychohistory, and now, and we have about 20 minutes before we're going to open up for questions and discussion. So yeah, so we're doing good, but just focus more internally on the Russian psyche and how it's been shaped by all of these forces.
I will then end with the map of the Soviet Union that used to be like this for almost half a century. And then in 1991, the country was under the breakdown or breakup, and we went back to the borders that used to be centuries before, but still there was a mix of nations, and there was a mix of culture because for several centuries we all lived together, and one of the politics of the government, especially of the Soviet government, was to mix people around the whole country. When you studied in the university or institute, and when you graduated from the institute or university, you would be not forcefully, but still, the education was for free, and the country needed you to work in this region or the other region, and you were not really free to choose which region you would be working. So there was a mixture of different nations around the USSR. And there was a mixture of different ethnicities around the USSR. So when the country broke apart, some people who were originally, for example, from the center of this map, they appeared to be at the borders of the countries that already were not USSR, not Russia, but a different country with different name. And we still have Soviet people. I can't say that they're Russians. They're Soviet people that still live in the part of the country that is not Soviet any longer. And Russia is not Soviet any longer. Um, mm. So it created a huge confusion inside the psyche. Who am I? Am I Soviet? Am I Russian? Am I Armenian? Or am I Kyrgyzstan? Because during the years of Soviet Union, people were raised mostly in mixed families. People were remarrying each other. People were moving to the different parts of the country. And when the breakup was, it was more political breakup, but not the internal breakup. And I think that this internal breakup, without being reflected on and without being shared among people, it brought us to the conflict that we have at the moment with all the bordering countries, because the new generation, or the generation that is there now, they're trying to rebuild the new identity, not being based on the Soviet identity. And they're trying to find roots on the previous historical facts and myths, erasing the Soviet identity. And it creates a huge split and tension. Because this Soviet identity is also full of the shadow projections that all wrong and all negative things were during the Soviet times. And because of the Soviet government and because of the Soviet occupation, we have these or that problems. But besides that, we have a huge influence of Soviet time that because of that we are alive. We are here because Soviet Union existed, and we don't know if we would be the same if all the countries developed differently. And going back to, that's where we started, and that's where we are at the moment, and that's the region that we are fighting with right now. And this is, I would like to emphasize it. This is the region that had a lot of fights historically. Every century there was a fight on this particular land. And there is another amazing thing that I wanted to put your attention to, is the map of Golden Ord. This is the Mongolian Golden Ord, the top picture. This is the USSR, and this is Russia. And I found this picture a week ago. And it is very amazing how the similarity of these pictures, like the golden ore that existed in the 13th century is almost the same in the shape, but it goes more on the south. As Russia and USSR. And the way Soviets or Russian Empire tried to merge or to invade or colonize the countries that were their neighbors is very similar to what the Golden Ore did. We didn't change their religion, we didn't change their language, we didn't change their educational system, but we tried to make them obeying the laws of the bigger nation. And to go back to the complex, the psychological, the cultural complex that Russian psyche has, ancient roots start with several families that couldn't befriend each other or couldn't unite without problems with each other, and they invited the Vikings to rule them. So it's like the necessity of Russian psyche to have someone from the outside to govern us and to make the structure, to bring the rules, and to manage the communication between different parties. And that's also the picture of Vasnetsov calling of the Vikings, and we can see the Slavic families and the Vikings. It is we can also find this in some fairy tales. One of the fairy tales about the Frog Princess, where there are three royal brothers who searching for whose father are telling them to find the bride, and they have the bow and the arrow, and they put the arrows to the different directions, and the little brother found his arrow at the marsh and the swamp, and the frog is carrying his arrow, and he is to marry the frog. This story reminds me of different Slavic families or different Slavic brothers that united together under the rules of Vikings, and they have this sibling competition between each other, whose bride is better. And one of the cultural complexes that I noticed among Russians is the complex of the little brother, complex of inferiority. What we have is something that is not so good as Western countries have, or what we have, we're not that educated as Western countries are. We're not that intelligent or that exquisite as others are. But in the shadow of this, the frog that is a wife of the little brother is the nature resource that is very richful, very artful, very fruitful. But we need somehow to humanize it, this resource that we still are very ashamed of. So this is one side of the complex that I can notice because I'm also in the inside the Russian complex, because I'm also Russian and I'm talking about the complex that we all are in, and this is the collective level of our psyche. And there was the same thing with, for example, Jungian psychology that was brought into Russia. We all had a very huge history of, not huge, for just several centuries or several decades of psychology inside Russia and Soviet Union. When there was a breakup of the Soviet Union, there were a lot of foreign psychologists who came to Russia teaching us new approaches to psychology, because Russian psychology was more on a collective level. It was the psychology of achievements and psychology of activity. And it was more how to make a collective working together to reach the good results together. It was not about the internal psyche, but it is more about the collective psyche, how to make a collective be more achieving. When Jungians came, we also were like wow, that's something new, and we are here just to learn something different from what we had. But then Russians recalled that Sabine Spielrein was Russian, and the majority of clients who helped Freud and Jung to create their theories were mostly rich Russian people who had their complexes. And because we had such a long winter time, we had time to go to Europe for to stay at mental hospitals for such a long period of time, do nothing, be the patients, and then for 3 months of summer, we would go back to Russia and work. So it was also um, a thing that came up to my attention. And about the religion and religious complexes, Russians consider themselves as very spiritful people, that they are very welcoming strangers, they're very their soul is wide and open, and one of the most famous Russian icon is Trinity by Andrei Rublev, and it also has very peculiar features here that we can't tell who is the Father, who is the Spirit, and who is the Son on this icon. The Trinity means in Russian Psyche means that we all are equal, and we all might be on different places around this table. And it when you look at this icon, you also can see that there is a place for the fourth, the watcher, the one who is watching this icon. So when you look at the Western icons, you always can tell who is who is the Father, who is the Spirit. Usually it's a white dove, and who is the Son. Here, the icon tries to hide these external differences, so we can attune to the figures internally. And it also shows this, I would say, persona parts of Russian cultural complex of being so neutral and friendly to others, but in the shadow of it, there is a very severe very violent attempt or violent side for those who betrayed. If you betray, you will see the totally different side of this. And betrayal considers the most bad thing the worst thing that you can do to a person or to the nation. And I think that's when the family or when the collective family and collective psyche considers those who came under the umbrella of Russia, family members or siblings. When one sibling tries to move to another family, it might be considered on a collective level as a betrayal, and betrayal should be punished in a very violent way. And if we go back in our imagination to these maps that I shared with you, and see this Western board, the countries that were under this all constant change of borders, they also have this feeling, who do I belong to? Who is my family? The Western countries or the Eastern ones? Because some Russian lands, they are stable in their identity because they were never invaded in this severe way or in this constant way by others, and they have more constant identity who they are. And those who are on the West, they are more flexible in their political identity. So it's the pressure on those who are on the inland of Russia to decide this brother is ours or theirs, and this is a huge pressure on the brother to decide which family is mine. Am I adopted child of the Western? Am I adopted child of Eastern? So this is behind this Trinity image of unity. And we also were talking about the shadow that shows itself, how the lack of education and spiritual life, and this lack was seen or created by the Soviet regime with taking away the church and religion from the people. And but even before that, people were drinking. There were a lot of alcohol, and there were a lot of liquors in Russia. And at the moment, we have also a lot of alcoholics in Russia and within Russians military service as well. So the lack of contact with your guardian angel would bring the demons to the table, and I think that the lack of reflection and the lack of connection with the roots in spiritual way also invites all these shadow contents into our psyche at the moment, because this level of aggression and tension that we have since 2008, I think is extraordinary and on the extreme. And maybe we will finish with this image. Our governor also consists, he's not by himself, he also consists of different citizens who live here, and his body is our citizens. And even me personally, I'm also is one who is giving him unconsciously and consciously energy and way to move. And if we change the body, if we change the psyche of those who are my neighbors in the building, my neighbors in the streets, probably the head would turn into different direction, and the spirit would be changed. So I consider my work as an analyst in private practice also changing the attitude between people and in the head of the governments. And my attempt in sharing my thoughts with you is also an attempt to bring more air between us, so we can discuss things not at the political level, but at the psychological level. And unfortunately, I don't have all the answers for this, but I'm inviting you to think with us and with me about this. And I'm more than sure that majority of Russians would tell you the story in a different way than I did today. And I realized that some of the questions were not answered by me. würde ich add. So I will stop the
Especially
presentation.
Natalia, I'm sorry you can't provide us all of the answers and solve all of our personal and global problems this morning. Thank you for trying. Your material is so important and fascinating, and you gave us, in my mind, a very good, deep introduction to the very complex psycho-historical, spiritual, cultural dimensions of Russian history and psyche, and made many important comments about the tensions and the differences between the East and the West that we all have to deal with. So thank you very, very much. And I know we have a lot of questions and concerns from our gathering. So let's hear from, yeah, there are hands raised. So from anybody and everybody, let's share and hear your questions and comments.
Go ahead, Judy, if you'll open your mic.
So thank you so much. I'll just jump right to my question. Do you feel that the current form of government is more a reflection of the mother complex or
Yes.
father?
Mother.
And the negative mother, is that what you would say? That, or is it good, positive mother?
If we go back to the Neumann concept, we are at the moments where we're facing the need to find a good father for this mother that is split, because the mother could consider herself as a good mother, but if we see her deeds and if we notice her moods, she's very fragile, and she needs a partner that could take her or appreciate her in the way she is, not judging her. And the people at the moment, as her children, they are doing it. They are voting for her. They are trying to help her, but this would never fit her up. And she would be always feeling herself, the government structure would feel that she is not accepted because people are not equal to her. And she needs an equal partner. And if we move back to the history of Russia, Russians never felt equal. Russian state, Russian governments, Russian tsars, they were never perceived as equal. They have this inferiority complex inside them.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And of course, we need to work on our own complexes ourselves. But this is a very painful thing. We're giving the codes of the big brother to us, the help of the big brother to us, and it creates more and more inferiority inside.
Yeah, thank you.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Judith.
Go ahead, Jack.
Hello. Thank you so much. I could just sit for hours and discuss this topic, and thank you so much for your presentation. I'm really interested in learning about identity construction formation in current times, and through your presentation, you really explained that there is a connection to the liminal very much in Russian psyche. the little brother and the frog, and the just geographically, and it's kind of in the liminal can be shifting. It's not necessarily steady and grounded. There's mist and fog and the in between spaces, and so it's difficult to have an identity formation based in the liminal. There's often, desire to look for rock and solid ground. But you just mentioned there seems to be an inferiority complex, and it's kind of like the little brother dynamic. But the little brother in the fairy tale with the frog princess or the frog prince or whatnot, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get to the point of like, perhaps there is something very, very specific, very, very potent about liminality in the Russian psyche that in connection with other cultures has been dismissed or denigrated in a way. And there's value and power there that everyone can learn from, not just, Russians, but the rest of the world as well. So I'd be interested in either now or in future time, presentations, hearing more about the liminality and the tensions that causes in identity formation, and what your thoughts are about that. Thank you.
I think that's this is a very big question, and we know that there are a lot of Russian philosophers and Russian religious people who wrote a lot, and they had this Berdyaev, Solovyov, mystics, Rerich, who tried to figure out how to bring spirituality into to the lay people. Even Tolstoy, in his late years, he stepped away from the church, and he started to think more about religion and spirits, not in the way the church did, but his thoughts were that the church betrayed the spirit in the institute. But I think that's this is too that my answer could be too long, and I see other hands raised. Probably next time I will answer it in written form.
Go ahead, Elliot.
All right. Hi, Natasha. Where to begin? How about this inferiority complex? I know, you talked about the fairy tale of the Frog Prince, and when I see pictures of Moscow, I'm always looking at an architecture that looks like it comes out of a fairy tale, or it looks like it comes from the East. And there's this always been, like, from Peter the Great and his focus on the West, all the way to the wars in Western Europe. And the idea of Russia, in my mind, in a lot of minds, it's part of Europe. It's the European, but there's got this whole thing that almost seems like a shadow. It goes all the way to the Pacific. And that was part of the Mongol, which must be, according, it's an insult that the Europeans lay on the Russians, that they're really Mongols, or they still have this Asian. So that part of the shadow, along with the imperial part of Russia, which is Catherine the Great and Peter the Great. And now we had two, for a while it was the Soviet Union Empire and the American Empire. Now we just have the American Empire. But beneath the surface of the Russian Republic is that all those imperial archetypes that must be there and must be complicating the identity, along with all the different parts of Russia. I see Putin as a person who's trying to, and this conflict that began in 2014, let's say, and the sanctions from the West, as creating a renaissance in Russia. And Putin trying to Russia is turning to the East, turning to their Eastern part of their psyche, and trying to revive the Orthodox Church, the ancient archetypes of not just the Russian identity, but he often in his speeches, he'll talk about the diversity and honor all of the different parts. which just seems like an impossible thing when you've got Muslims in the South and you've got, the pagan, Siberian parts and all of that. This renaissance that is experiencing itself in Russia, it seems from my perspective, what I'm seeing is that Russians are now beginning to have a Russian pride because of where they've gone to in this conflict in terms of reviving their economy, their culture. Is that just an erroneous perception that these dynamics are at work in the Russian psyche towards a revival of the Eastern psyche of Russia?
Thank you for your question. And I think it's very paradoxical that Soviet people also were very proud to be Soviet. And we had this Iron Curtain. We also were cut off from the influence of West. And we were in a very hermetic vessel. And at the moment, we also a bit cut off, and we also have this Iron Curtain between our countries. And it gives us the opportunity to stop comparing ourselves to the West, but we are connecting to the East at the moment. And I was amazed that in the December 25th in the New Yorker, there was an article that described the visit of Roman Pope to Mongolia. It was the first his visits in history. He visited Mongolia, and he said that probably that there was a misunderstanding of the influence of Mongolian ord to Europe. And now they are revising the influence of Mongols to the European culture and history. So, yeah, I think that's there is a positive effect. Somehow it happened. And some of my colleagues from Kazakhstan, they visited Moscow a couple months ago, and they said that Moscow, and they haven't been here since maybe the beginning of the millennium, and they said that probably Moscow became more friendly. Because some people, and this is also another split in Russian society, some people left because they can't stay here being not accepting what the Russian government does. And they left. I'm not connecting these things, but chronologically it happened this way. They left, but the country became more friendly. Like they were always protesting. They were always feeling uncomfortable within the country. But when they moved where they wanted to belong to, here the tension also low down. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or I'm just continuing my own thoughts. But yes, we're coming. Before, English and German and French were very popular at school. Now at our schools, the second language is the Chinese, somehow. So we are turning to East. Thank you. Dennis?
Yeah, thank you, Natalia. The timeline that you gave us and your careful delineation of it was just magnificent. So I want to thank you for that. So here's how synchronicity works. 3 days ago, I received my January 2024 issue of Harper's. And the byline is Inside Russia. And the title fascinates me, and I'm glad that I'm following Eliot, where he was speaking about retrieval, which is what this article does. Behind the new Iron Curtain, caviar, counterculture, and the cult of Stalin reborn. And I'd like to read the first sentence of the article. Russia has become, to observers in the West, a distant, mysterious, and hostile land once again. It seems implausible in the age of social media that so little should be known about the country that has shattered the international order, but the shadows surrounding Russia have only grown since the days of the Soviet Union. And are you able, Natalia, to, well, first of all, validate? I mean, is this part of what's taking place in Russia? The return of Stalinism, the return of communism, but it's keeping its spiritual dimension, as this really tremendously helpful article lays out. So it feels like, I don't know if split is the right term or merging is the right way to think about what's taking place in this retrieval of Stalinism and communism, according to this journalist who seemed to have done his homework.
Yes and no. Yes, we have, like, the country starts to cleaning up. There is a lot of corruption, and now there are some cases opening up our attention to the corruption on the in our government. And we might see it as a return of Stalinism, because there was a competition between the leaders, and they tried to compete with each other and kill each other. But on the other hand, there is a lot of paranoia within the country, but there is also a fresh air.
Mm.
And I think we talked about this with Ed, and the freedom that we had since the beginning of the 90s was too much. And there were some rules and borders just ruined, and it opened up the place not only to the positive things, but to the negative things as well. And I was talking about the psychiatry and the psychiatrical symptoms that now are considered as the normal deviation, but they are not. And all these contagious symptoms, they are just very dangerous to the psychic health for the collective. And all these laws and rules that are thought of very strict, of course, they're over strict, but they're trying to put the borders back. So it's like, I forgot the word for that, something that makes a balance, but at the moment it feels like is over balanced or over strict. Because some of the people who are the voices of new liberation movements, they are sick, mentally sick. And because they are saying something, let's free everybody, it doesn't mean that the message probably is good, but the place where they are carrying it from, it is a very tricky ground.
Yeah. Thank you, Natalia, very much.
Thank you. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Natalia. Such a pleasure to see you. I was delighted to get the invitation to the conference yesterday, and I'm so happy to see you. I'll be in touch with you in the next few days about our little thing together. But when you were talking, I was impressed that you reintroduced some things into the discussion that used to be in the discussion of the psychological differences or the national character. There used to be there was a whole wing of psychohistorical studies on national character. What's the British character? What's the particular personality of a whole nation? And people don't do much of that anymore. But at that time, two things was psychogeography and psychoclimatology. I mean, people would talk about the weather and the land, and the size of the land and all these things. And in a very intriguing way, you brought back these two factors into the discussion. The size of countries over time does matter. The Louisiana Purchase in America changed the entire psychology of the country. And then the purchase of Alaska, the Seward's Folly. It was called the Seward's Folly. It was supposed to be, they would have, if social media had been there, Mr. Seward would have been, he would have been completely trashed by everybody. Anyway, I thank you for that. And then the other thing that occurs to me is that the actual thing that was the end of relations between Freud and Jung, it didn't have to do with their different locations or their different ages or their the different ethnicities or religions. It was really that in 1913 at the Munich conference, Jung gave a paper in which he compared Freud with Alfred Adler. And he said Freud has a sex psychology and Adler has a power psychology, which was true. Adler is the person who came up with the idea of the inferiority complex. He also came up with the idea on the other side of the superiority complex. And Americans and Westerners, Europeans as well, I'm not sure which ones are more arrogant, but they actually have an attitude of superiority to the rest of the world. They still do. They believe that they can tell the rest of the world what to think or do or feel. And I see that as part of the background of the local conflicts over in your part of the world. I'd also just like to say that I'm going to show you a book. Since Dennis, I think, has been showing books around, I'm going to beat him here with Jack Goody. Jack Goody was a British anthropologist, and this book contains a little chart. It's the different ethnicities all the way from England over to Russia, or in fact, even over to Turkey. Now, they've got all the qualities of these are the costumes up here of the different groups. This is from the 18th century. It's an Austrian chart translated into English. But if you look at these, the characteristics that the prejudices people had against other countries and other ethnicities at that time, it's really quite funny and horrifying. Now, none of the different countries really comes off as better than the others. They all have really strange and peculiar and disturbing kinds of qualities. But I just want to share with you what, coming from Austria, they were saying about what they called Muscovites, people from Moscow. Here we go. These are some manners. The Russians are malicious. Your intellect, no skill whatsoever. Physical features, infinitely rough. Your costume, your clothing is chains. That's kind of poetic or metaphorical, I guess. The country is full of ice, which you mentioned as well. The pastime is sleeping. This is what you're talking about too, in some way, is resting and working 3 months out of 12, I guess. Life ends. Where does it end? In the snow. So this is the continuing attitude that, I'm sure you're quite familiar with this. I'm not telling you anything new. You've talked about the Russian side of it and characterized it as a kind of inferiority, but there's a very, very dangerous, Western and American attitude of superiority toward anybody living in the area of the Golden Horde. Anyway, thank you again very much for your presentation. It's lovely to see you, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for adding this. And I see that there are some questions about the Austrian author that you mentioned about the tables. Okay. Probably you can answer them in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, let's not waste your time here.
Yeah.
You only have a certain amount of time. You go ahead.
Thank you. Christian.
So first of all, just thank you for the immense level of research and erudition and the display of all those maps and details. It would be wonderful to have a textual version of what you said, because sometimes it was hard to keep up, but it was very, very rich. Thank you. I read a fair amount of Russian literature from the 19th century and a fair amount of poetry from the 20th century. And I had two questions. One is there still in contemporary Russia the very distinct gap between what used to be the serfs and what used to be the upper classes, or what used to be the intelligentsia and what used to be the working people? How does that play out now? And then the other question is just what would you most like Americans to know about Russia that you feel that they do not know? It's important that you really want them to get something about your country that you can perhaps clarify for us. But thanks again.
Thank you for the question. I will try to to answer the first one. Yes, there is a gap, and I think that this gap existed forever. I didn't continue about the serfdom. When the serfdom was gone, then some of the peasants and people who belonged to their owners, they felt also like orphans, like they didn't belong to anyone. And when the revolution came, there were collective farms where people could work, and it also gave some borders and some rules and some containment and feeling of belonging to them. And they worked really well there. And some people, there was a feeling of collective identity. And some people were criticizing it, that they were also used by governments. But some people, they can't live in a different way. They need this firm hand that would carry them. And at the moment, I traveled a lot this summer through almost 2/3 of the country, to Siberia and to Mongolia by car. And we saw some villages that are empty, and some villages that have a lot of people who drink. While they don't have this strong hand, they are losing their direction, because if they have no education, they can't. There is nothing to rely on or to cling on. I think that's the most important thing that we can develop at the moment is the educational system. Without education, we won't go anywhere, because nothing can be, if a person doesn't know himself, and if a person doesn't know what life or what world is consist of, you can rule him in both ways, positive and negative. That's so we have this difference and the gap at the moment. And at the moment we have a sitcom, a very fresh, that describes the quality of our life at the end of the 80s. So 30 years ago, 40 years ago, there were a huge amount of gangsters and a huge amount of local bands in the streets. And one of the reasons it took such a huge scale was because the people from the villages, they came to work at the factories. They moved to the cities, and they brought with themselves this village way of thinking. you are ours or you are not ours. And they started to fight with each other, and they tried to distinguish the rules, but there were no rules in the cities. So they started to fight and they started to defend the streets. This block is mine and this block is yours. And people from the factories the neighborhood where factories are, they still are considered to be not the safe place to be in the city, because people who live there or who work there, they usually work just to survive, not to develop their inner life and to educate their children. So their children, they left on the streets. And they're like the Lord of Flies. They still create their own very violent universe inside the big cultural cities. So I'm not sure if I answered your questions, but they do. The gap still exists. And the second one. Forgive me.
I asked what you would like Americans to know.
Americans, yeah. I think Russians are very familiar with the negative sides of the mother complex, and we can teach a lot about it. Because my first impression when I came to the States, and no offense, I don't want to offend anyone in the public, that this is a big kindergarten for adults. That was my first impression, that your life is very, very happy and untroubled. And it's good that people are smiling to everyone, but it's like no big troubles were ever faced. And here in Russia, we are facing a lot of tension. And I know that a Russian character is people who are very grumpy and they are not smiling, because we carry a lot of memories of this negative mother complex. And but it's not because we are grumpy and we are hostile to others. It's because we know this hostility inside us. No, but we can be very good friends. That's probably one thing that's I would like Americans to know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Rick?
Thank you, Natalia. Let me just jump in.
Yes, Ed, yes.
Well, we're
Yes.
at our 2-hour time. There are many more questions. I don't know if you want to stay a few more minutes and take more questions, or should we shut down?
Can we take one more last question and then we will
Okay.
end?
It's okay with me. and everybody can
I'm not
stay.
watching the time at the moment, sorry.
We don't want to either. Everything that you're sharing is so interesting and important. So thank you. So I guess it's up to you to call the last question person.
I saw the hand of Rick.
Rick, yes.
Yeah, hi.
Hello.
My question is about, I'm just curious about the pulse of the Russian people. I'm sure there's diversity in it, but like, do you feel like there's a lot of people behind the inferiority complex of like, we need to take Ukraine and show the West that we're powerful, that we're not inferior? Or do you feel like there's more passivity or just kind of going along with the dictator kind of energy of, I'm just curious, like if you had any thoughts about like what the pulse of the Russian people are and the war and the archetype of inferiority.
I think that's one direction that the energy flows is the revival of the archetype of the hero. And it brings a lot of energy inside people. if you go do what the land asks you, you will become a hero. And this hero archetype is a bit different from what you are saying, the being a slave or being forced by the dictator. It's a bit different because that was not my point to discuss the political issue today. I would stay here with the hero archetype that is activated inside Russia, because for the last 3 decades, Russians felt inferior. The amount of money and treasures that Russian had during the last decades, it only shows the high level of inferiority that is behind this need of money and all these luxury things. And I think that this inferiority can be healed through activation of hero archetype as well. So it's behind what you are saying, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Spasiba, Natalia, for everything that you've shared, for your willingness to be with us, for all of the love and wisdom you bring. I want to emphasize a few of your last remarks. Yes, we're in kindergarten here on this side of the world. Yes, some of us really know and appreciate and respect how profoundly much Russia has sacrificed and suffered. And yes, we can be friends, and we need to be friends and have many more meetings and discussions like this so we can understand each other in an embracing way rather than projecting way. So thank you so much for the presentation, and thank you to everybody for being here and opening your minds and hearts and sharing this way. So do you have anything else you'd like to say for closing, Natalia?
I don't want to take your time with this. I just want to thank you all for inviting me. Thank you, Ed, for trusting me, and thank you all the guests that you came to listen to a person from Russia and a very unknown person to you, and that you are willing to listen to the other side. It's very important.
If you have a few moments, just look at the chat and see all of the gratitude and respect and honor that's coming to you and
Thank
to
you.
Russia. And we do really put our world back together this way, at least a little bit, and between all of us, and then we'll carry it on. So thank you and bless you. So Christine, as president of our Young Association, do you want to say anything to close us down?
Yes, thank you, Ed. I want to thank everyone for coming, and Ed for all the preparation and guidance that I know you've been, helping, and especially to Natalia for this wonderful and a little bit unusual opportunity to speak with someone directly from another country, and particularly from Russia. So just thank you for a very, very rich program this afternoon.
Thank you.
Yes.
Maybe one more thing that I would mention, that there is a book edited by Thomas Singer that is called Cultural Complexes. Europe Has Many Souls, or something like this. It will be published this year, and one of the chapters is written by me. So if you would like to see or to get some more details about the way I see the things, you can read this book as well.
Wonderful to know about. Thank you.
So thank you for being with me and my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bless you, Natalia. We'll be in touch again very soon, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Carry it on.